even said anything yet. You can go home now, Jeremy. That's it.
Very
You've
nice.
done
It's
it.
very nice. I think they're a bit chilly. They just wanted to warm up. I know the feeling.
Alan, thank you so much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's such a pleasure to be here this evening and to be in conversation with the wonderful Jeremy Irons. Now, he doesn't need any introduction, but I'm just going to remind you of a few things.
Have you seen her list of questions? It's absolutely terrifying. That thick.
Jeremy said he's going to he's challenged me, and when I get to number 3, that's it, he's going to stop.
Yeah, well,
we won't
see.
let him.
We'll see.
And actually, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask questions, we're going to be in conversation for about 40 minutes, and after that, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Can I just say I'd like to thank Alan for an enormously generous donation to Children in the Arts, which was he's given tonight.
Thank you so much, Alan. Well, of course, Jeremy Irons, the world-renowned actor, and one of the very few, ladies and gentlemen, to have achieved the Triple Crown of acting, winning an Oscar, Emmy and Tony Award. Having trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, he launched onto the television screens, of course, in Brideshead Revisited, one of the most popular and successful television adaptations ever made. He's gone on to have an extraordinarily diverse career, from Shakespeare to The Simpsons, across theatre, film, radio and television, and has been a prominent figure in the film industry for over 40 years. He started very, very young, with more than 60 film credits to his name. He's a strong and outspoken advocate for environmental awareness, is a passionate supporter for many charities and organisations, including the Prison Phoenix Trust, the Hope Foundation, and of course, Children and the Arts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome once again, Jeremy Irons.
So nice to be in a full house.
What do you mean, Jeremy? You have a full house every night at Long Day's Journey.
Well, that's true,
tonight.
but we can't
Yes.
see them. I can see you. Great, great.
Well, as Alan said, this is actually your night off. You're just coming to the end of the London run of Long Day's Journey in tonight. Then you're taking it to New York. And then, yes, Jane, you can see it in New York. And then to Los Angeles as well. But you have described it as it's almost like climbing a mountain every night. What sort of preparation goes into something like
What, every night or doing it, just generally doing it?
Every night.
Well, it is interesting. I saw Laurence Olivier do it when I was around 24. I was doing Godspell in the West End at the time, and he was playing it. It was an old Vic production, but it transferred into what was then the Albury and is now, I think, the Coward Theatre. And I went on a matinee and saw him, and it's always remained in my memory. Constance Cummings and Ronald Pickup and Dennis Quilley were the two boys. And it sat there a bit like the apex for me. I thought, God, a fantastic play and a fantastic role. So then I went to see Leslie Manville in a production of Ghosts, which Richard Add directed at the Trafalgar Theatre. And I was very cross I wasn't in it, because it was very good. And then, so I said to Richard, why aren't I in this? And he said, well, I don't know, you're not one there or something. And then he asked me to go and do Henry IV for him on the television. And then when we'd done that, he said, well, do you want to have a crack at Long Day's Journey? And do you know, I'm coming up to 70, and I don't know how long you can learn lines, but I don't think I've got many years left. And also, I don't know how long I got the energy to sort of do that. And so I thought, well, I better do it now. I've been off doing films. I think I haven't done a play. I think the last thing I did was at Hampstead, actually, at the... Anyway, that was about 10 years ago, I think.
Yes, 10 years.
You lose the muscles. You lose... And theatre, there's nothing like theatre if it's really good theatre. And I thought, well, Richard Eyre's a great director. Leslie's a wonderful actress. Let's do this. But it took me 3 months, I think, to learn it.
Gosh.
Yes. And it is a very strangely difficult part. Olivier said it was the hardest part he ever played. And David Suchet, who played it in London, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I met him the other day at the memorial of John Barton, a great theatrical director. And David said it's the hardest role he's ever played. And so it has been a journey for me, but really good. I mean, it's great to get fit, mentally and sort of physically fit, actually. I went for my massage. I try and have one every week, but does a sort of spoiler for me. And she said about 2 weeks ago, and I was by then about 6 weeks into the play, she said, you know, you're really getting a much stronger back. And I thought, that's interesting. That's just diaphragm and actually just, you know, doing it. It's very good for you. So, preparation. Yeah. Preparation is, I mean, you have to eat well. I have a wife who's wonderful, and she makes things called smoothies.
Oh, what's in the smoothies? Oh,
everything. A lot of green stuff. A lot of veg. A lot of fruit. Oats. I mean, little nutty things. Everything goes in there. She's wonderful, and it tastes delicious, actually. And I have that every morning. And she makes sure I eat really well, because eating is not something I'm very clever at. And you have to. You have to have your carbohydrates before you actually do it at around 5 o'clock, just so you've got some burn in you. And so that's important. Getting your sleep is important. Fortunately, I sleep very well, so it means I just sleep longer now. Don't ring me before 10. But the hardest thing is the mental agility, the freshness, mental freshness. When you're doing the same thing, saying the same words, the same actions, I mean, I try and vary them a little bit just to keep the others on their toes. Nevertheless, they're mainly the same. When you're doing that night after night, it's really hard to keep it electric and exciting for yourself. And if it's not like that for yourself, it won't be for the audience. So there are lots of little tricks to do that. And strangely enough, I think one of the best things is to have an interesting day. Yeah. Because if you have an interesting day and you've done something which has sort of inspired you in some way, that carries over. Whereas if you've, you know, not done anything that's right, you go and you're a bit sort of glum and that can carry over. So I think it's important to live a good day, not too exhausting a day, but a good day, a bit of exercise and a chore. I try and do a chore a day.
That must make your wife very happy.
It does.
So yes, when she gives you the
Funny enough, an hour ago I was in the garden thinking I've got to go now. I was still.
Do you think you're your own sort of worst self-critic in a sense, Jeremy? I mean, you say that you know, there's preparation and you want to make sure that it's fresh for every night and how you do that. And then at the end of the performance, do you sit and think about it or you can turn off?
Oh, you can turn off. Yeah. Although, strangely enough, it does stay with me at the minute. Lines keep coming to me, things keep coming. I think, I could try that. Just sort of, it is there. It's fading a bit, but certainly for the first 4 or 5 weeks, it was really there. But of course, doing other activities helps you turn off. And at night, I usually sit in front of the telly for about an hour to try to. There's great stuff on late at night. You know, there's a lot of signing. They do programs with signing. Well, I don't need the signing, but I often see programs that I have missed. Yes. So it's quite nice between 12 and 1 watching the telly. Channel 4. Is it Channel 4 or BBC 4? BBC 4. Really good, isn't it? Really good. All the other channels seem to have betting on and casinos and game shows.
Now, Jeremy, you did say that you are in your 70th year, I believe, in September.
I know, it's terrifying.
You'll be celebrating. Yeah. But I want to take you back.
I won't be celebrating.
You won't be celebrating?
No.
Why not? Why?
I'll be starting a long period of mourning for my life.
The leader of the free world is 70. You've got so much to look forward to.
Wisdom, one hopes.
What I'd like to do, Jeremy, is actually take you back to where it all started, because you grew up in the Isle of Wight. You went to Sherborne School, a public school, and you didn't immediately, you said actually you wanted to become a vet.
Yeah.
So how did you end up at the Bristol Old Vic dramas?
Well, I wanted to be a vet because I had a childhood friend of my parents who was a vet, Derek Danby, his name was, and he had a practice in London, Brompton Road or something, for the week, where he'd look after people's poodles and that sort of thing. And then he would come down to the Isle of Wight and look after people's cows and horses and dogs, bigger dogs. And I thought, that's a great life, because you get paid well in London, and you have a bit of city time, and then you get home for the weekend, and you have that sort of country. And I thought, that's a nice balance. I'd like to do that. And I bought a lot of books about veterinary. I've still got them, actually, and sort of dipped in a bit and got. But then I showed myself to be hopeless at the sciences.
Okay.
And it's a very long training to be a vet. I think it's 2 years longer than a doctor, 7 years. And not being good at the science, I thought, no, I better leave that. And when I came to leave school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to do some social work in Camberwell. I became a social worker in a parish, which has now sadly all been knocked down and big high-rises built. But in those days, it was still terrace houses. St. Luke's in Peckham. And I got a lot of the rubbish that I'd been taught at school knocked out of me. I remember one specific moment as I'd ejected some people from the youth club, which I ran on a Sunday night. And they objected to their ejection. And as I lay underneath I felt like a dozen kicking boots, I thought, there's got to be a different way to get people to do what I want. and so it was very good for me. And also I worked sort of, I ordered the communion wine. I interviewed people who wanted to get married, which is great. I think I was 17 and a half. And I would sit there in the vestry and, fill in forms and think, is this a good idea? Do you think it's a good idea? But I also visited a lot of people who were in trouble sort of socially. And it's very sad, some of it was. I mean, I remember going to one lady's house in a terrace, and she'd been born in the house, and all the walls were wallpapered with magazine articles and newspaper articles. It was a wonderful sort of kaleidoscope of her life surrounding her. And she was about to be, I think she was in her about 93. She was about to be upped and moved to a high-rise in Sidcup, and I thought, I don't think this is right, this way of running cities. However, they did. They then built the Sumner Estate, or whatever, where people get knifed every now and again now. Nevertheless, it was a learning experience, but I was advised by my employers not to get involved. And I found this really hard. I wanted to get involved. And they said, no, you must help, but remain. And this didn't seem satisfactory at all. At the same time, I was busking in Leicester Square with my guitar,
yes. Yeah.
Doing cinema cues and earning a fortune. I was earning for my social work £2.10 a week, and I could get £5 for a cue, which was 35 minutes. And so I thought I'd really fallen into, nirvana. And I would strap my guitar onto the back of the bike and cycle up to the West End and do 2 or 3 cues and come back laden with money. Allowed me to buy my first car. So I had a sort of feeling I wanted to keep doing that sort of thing. I thought, I want to be a gypsy. I want to work in the circus or in the fun fair. And then I remember I was playing, there's a wonderful pub on the corner of Epsom Downs where they have the Derby. And I was there for Derby Day, and I was playing in the pub, and they were feeding me, and I was sleeping under a hay bale, actually. I made a little house in a field next to where they do the Derby. But there's a great big circus, or fun fair, for Derby Day. And I remember wandering around the trailers and getting to talk to people and getting to look at the sleeping accommodation. And I decided that it was not for me. It was basically sort of 3 people in a cabin, a bit like a sort of third-class old train cabin, but a big trailer. And I thought, no, I think I'm too middle class for that. I think I'd like to have my own place. And the circus I explored in the same way, and I found the same sort of thing. And I thought, no, maybe I'll try the theatre. And there was, I think there still is, a newspaper called The Stage. And on the back of that, there were adverts, and they advertised for an acting ASM on the back of the Stage newspaper for Canterbury, the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury. And so I applied, and I got the job. And I went down to the Marlow Theatre in Canterbury and got a little bed sit. And absolutely loved it. I love the hours. I love the fact that we didn't have to go to work till 10 and that we didn't go to sleep, didn't sort of leave the pub till about 2. And we seemed to sort of work. We worked when everyone else was playing, and we played when everyone else was working. And I love the smells of the stuff. What do they make the flats with in those days? The glue, whatever it was. There's a whole theatre smelt of, and I was able to make my props and for the show. I mean, we was doing the Dancing Years with Marion Grimaldi. Anybody remember Marion Grimaldi? No. Oh, well, she was wonderful. She was wonderful. But this was a very long time ago.
We may have a few takers.
and I just love the people. I love their attitude. I love their openness, their fragility. And I love the discipline of it. And so I thought, well, life might suit me. I better go and learn how to do it. And so I auditioned for drama schools. And they all said, I went to RADA and Central down the road and LAMDA and Bristol. And the London ones all asked me, why do you want to be an actor? And I don't know, I just think it's quite a nice way to spend my life. Well, this was not the answer they needed. So they all said, well, go away and think about whether in a year's time you still feel it'll be the way you want to spend your life. So I did, I went away. But the man at Bristol, a great man of theatre called Nat Brenner, recognised something in me. Not necessarily talent, but he said, you'll look well on the edge of a stage in a suit. And that was enough for him to take me on. Yeah. And so I found myself there. None of my peers, Tim Piggott-Smith, who used to live around here, Tim who played Charles III. Tim was a colleague of mine at theatre school. Christopher Biggins, he was my best man at my first wedding. Oh. He was a colleague at theatre school. Yeah. We were a good year. Yeah. And but they all thought I'd be an antique dealer because I would supplement my grant, grant from my father, in fact, supplement my grant by buying and selling antiques and pictures. And they thought I would go into that. I showed more talent for that than acting. But I went down to the theatre. Yeah. They took 5 of us down there at the Theatre Royal in Bristol, and I found myself sort of doing all right, learning, anyway, continuing to learn, which is what I'm still doing, really.
Then you got a role in Godspell back in London. Do you think that was sort of the start of it, Jeremy? Do you think Godspell was a bit of a...
I don't know. I see it as a sort of continual route. I mean, I always knew... I would look very carefully at other actors and think, well, he's wonderful, but he's always working in rep. That means he's got to have a place in London and then rent a place when he's up in Stafford or Cardiff or... how can he keep his wife with him? And how can he keep a mortgage? I thought, that's not a very good way to run life. I don't think I can do that, much as I would like to keep working in rep, and much as in those days there was a rep system. I could have continually kept moving around the country, doing great plays. But I thought, no, I've got to go to London. So, because I want a mortgage and a marriage. So I came to London, and I took a room down in Southwark, and I worked for a company called Domestics Unlimited. Oh. Do you remember Domestics Unlimited? They used to advertise on the back of What's On magazine. And there was a nice little poem, and that was what attracted me. They said, a refined Lady Char from Mill Hill said, if I scrub the floor, I feel ill. Her employer said, don't. If you can't, then you won't, but Domestics Unlimited will. And I found that so attractive that I asked if I could become one of their, domestics. And I had a car by then.
Yeah.
I had
the basket.
Yeah, a £5 Morris, open Morris Minor. And so I was able to go to places quite quickly. And so if people let them down, they'd call me and say, could you go up to her? Now, we worked for people whose marriages were on the rocks. and therefore the housework had just fallen apart, or who just had a lot of babies and couldn't afford nappies, or had a new dog. Or every house I went into was a sort of a desert. It was a desert with excrement on carpets and dust and grease everywhere. It was ghastly. But because I'd been to public schools, probably the only good thing public school ever taught me was how to clean. Because you, as a fag, you have to clean for the older boys. You have to clean their studies. So, and they were terrible, the older boys. They would go along, you know, the picture rail with a finger, and if there was anything on their fingers, you had to do it all again. So I was meticulous in my cleaning. I was very good, and I became firm favourite for Domestics Unlimited.
You were in demand.
I was in demand.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I was auditioning, because I thought I am an actor, not a cleaner. And for every audition that took me out of London, if they asked me to do the work, I'd say, no, I'm sorry, I can't, but thank you so much for seeing me. Because I knew I wanted to be in London. And eventually, I auditioned for a show called Godspell.
Yeah.
And my only disadvantage, really, apart from the fact I'm not a very good singer or a very good dancer, is that I was a little bit too tall. And the Americans love everything. And I remember they got us to 12 in the cast, but they got us down to 30, and they lined us up, the last 30, on the front of the stage. And I was actually that end, but I won't go that end because I'll obscure Tania. I was on the end, and every time I looked along the line, and they were all... and every time I did that, they'd say, "Stand up, Jeremy." So I knew that they were thinking about me. And indeed, they did cast me. With David Essex, and we had a lot of fun. It was it was at that point that I thought, I'm in the right business.
Yeah.
I like this business, and I think I've got something to offer, which is a bit different from some other actors.
Well, then, of course, in 1981, Brideshead Revisited.
Yeah.
And that launched you. You became incredibly well known from that. But also at the same time, you were cast in The French Lieutenant's Woman opposite Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
So you had a kind of double whammy, so to speak.
But I earned it. You know, it was absolutely terrible. I mean, first of all, Brideshead. George Howard, who owns Castle Howard, came to see a show I was doing in Greenwich, and he said, "Have you read Brideshead Revisited?" He was a friend because he was the chairman of the BBC and had fancied my wife and kept asking her to corporate dinners there. So he felt he had to come and see my play in order to show that he wasn't, you know. And so he came to see it, and he said, "Have you read Brideshead?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, read it, because there's a great part for you in it. And Granada is going to borrow my house, or rent my house, Castle Howard, to film it." Anyway, so he said, so I read it, and he thought I'd be rather good as Sebastian, but I didn't want to do Sebastian, I wanted to do Charles. And I wrote to them and said, to Granada, and said, "I'd love to be in this." They said, "Well, we haven't got a director yet, or dates or anything." But anyway, they came back to me eventually and asked me to do Sebastian, and I said, "No, I want to do Charles," and they let me do Charles. But that was as a result we had a strike. And at the same time, Carol Rice asked me to do The French Lieutenant's Woman.
Yes. Yep.
And Brideshead was supposed to be finished, and then I'd start French Lieutenant's Woman. But we had a strike, technician strike at Granada for, I think, about 4 months. So everything went up the chute. And we thought we'd lost the series. But Derek Granger, who was our producer, was like a dog with a bone, and got onto us all and said, "Listen, can you start again in January?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I can start again in January, but I'm not free from March through till July because I'm making a movie." He said, "Have you signed for it?" I said, "Well, no, but I think it's going to happen." And he said, "Well, we'll sort that out when it happens." And so I said, "Okay, well, we went back to Brideshead, and then in about February, I think late February, because I'd said to Carol Rice, "You can't cast me." Remember Simon Ward? Simon was getting everything because he'd done Young Churchill. Winston.
Young Winston, yeah.
And he was getting everything that I was up for because he was a name. And I said to Carol, "You won't be able to cast me because I'm not a name." He said, "Well..." Anyway, he called me at the end of February and said, "I don't need you to be a name because I got Meryl Streep. She's the name." So I said, "Well, that's great." And he said, so open a bottle of champagne. I remember I was up in the estate office in Castle Howard. I took the call. And about 5 minutes later, he called back and he said, wait a minute, there seems to be a slight problem. Don't open the champagne, just get it out.
Dear. Oh, no.
I discovered what the problem was that Granada was saying, sorry, chum. We can't lay off for 4 months while you go off and do the film. We've got a big production here. And they'd spent by then $5 million. And it was very interesting, because there I was, a good sort of young British actor, beginning to make my mark. And so I didn't know what to do, And I felt I was on the moral high ground, because I said to my producer, I'm going to have to do this film. And he said, we'll sort it out when it happens. And so I played very tough with them. And I told them that they could take me to court, but that I had my house in Well Walk was worth about 68 grand. And I knew they'd spent $5 million, so they couldn't get a lot off me. They could bar me from being an actor, but I would be quite happy to be an architect or an agent or something. Go ahead. And if they didn't agree, I was going to walk.
Gosh. And
this was after a lot of toing and froing with lawyers and whatever. I didn't hear back from Sir Dennis Foreman, who ran Granada at that time, 6:30. So I got into my car and I drove down the M6, was it, from Manchester? We were in Tatton Hall at that time. Drove down to Hampstead and got to the kitchen, sat in the kitchen. Sinead was up in Stratford, so she wasn't about. And I was sort of having a smoke and a cup of tea, and the phone rang, and it was my agent who was going berserk. And she said, what have you done? You've walked. Because people don't walk in this country. Yeah. You just don't. Yeah. And I said, well, yeah, I told them I was going to if they didn't get in touch, and they didn't get in touch. She said, well, look, go back, get in the car, go back. I said, I haven't come down all this way to go back. I'm going out. David Essex was opening in Silver Dream Racer that night. I said, I'm going to Leicester Square, I'm going to a premiere. Call me in the morning. And off I went and got very drunk. And then the following morning she called me and she said, sweetheart, she said, Dennis Foreman wants to have lunch with you. No, tea with you, that's right. No, wait a minute. No, I'm getting it wrong. She said, I want to have lunch with you. So I went and joined her for lunch in some smart restaurant somewhere. And during lunch, the phone rang. And the waiter came and said, there's a call for you, Miss Trans. And it was Dennis Foreman who said, come and have tea with me. Or his minion said, come and have tea with me. It wasn't actually him. So I turned up to Golden Square, where Granada had their offices, and I was shown into his capacious office, and I remember something like that. I thought, I'm going to sit with my back to the window. I think it's a very strong position. Backlit. Which was the obvious place to sit, because his desk faced the window. However, I felt empowered by my position. And this very nice gentleman, who felt very badly done by me, came in and told me that he felt very badly done by. And he had this whole crew was now just hanging about, chewing their fingernails up in Manchester, waiting for me. And felt that I'd let them down badly. And I said, well, I think you've let me down. And anyway, after a fairly tense meeting, he left the room, made a phone call, and came back and said, if you go back to work tonight, we have a deal. So I went back to work. I drove back up to... And Brideshead took money in Friendship Tennis Women, and Friendship Tennis Women helped a little bit for the layoff for Brideshead. So they sort of interwove. And as a result of that, yes. I did them both. And I remember going up to, I lived in Hampstead at the time, going up to the Tube one morning and being terrified to see that my name was on the front of 4 supplements. Oh, gosh. And suddenly I was sort of, boom, known.
Famous.
And I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
2 things from that, Jeremy. One is what a risk that you took, because they could have said no.
It's when I grew up, actually.
Okay, so that's... Okay.
On that journey down to London, I thought, bugger it, I'm my own man. And I've never really lost that, actually. It's quite a useful quality.
No, but very interesting that you were willing to take that risk as a young actor then. Yeah. And also you saying that you saw your face on the Sunday supplements, and then fame hit you, didn't it? And everybody knew who you were. French Lieutenant.
Well, not everybody, but the funny thing is, you go into a restaurant and only maybe 2 people know you, but you don't know which 2. So that for you, they all know you. And you feel
say
sort
hello
of...
to everyone.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
But how did you cope with that fame? Because you said you didn't like it.
Well,
but
I
you
went
had to
undercover a
cope.
bit,
Yeah.
which I sort of stayed in that sort of place. But I remember about a year later, I was swimming in Sydney Harbour. I was out there making a film with Liv Ullmann and of The Wild Duck, which I hope none of you have seen because it's not very good. And I was swimming on a Sunday off Manly Cove in the harbour, and we parked the boat, and they were making lunch, and I was just getting a cool down. And as I came up for air, I heard a voice. I can't do accents. Heard a voice saying, "Hello, Jeremy." And what was that? And I looked around. There was a couple sitting in the back of their boat having their lunch, and they could see me swimming. And I said hello, and they said, "Having a nice time?" I said, "Yeah, thanks very much." Yeah. And they said, "Well, good to see you." And I said, "Well, thanks very much." And I swam off. And I thought, that's all it is, really. It's the world becomes your village. Yeah. And I was brought up in a village in the Isle of Wight. I know about villages, and I still live in a village in Oxfordshire. And it's actually a wonderful way to live. So I said, that's all it means. It means that most people know you. And they'll also want to know your business, so you're going to have to be careful about that, which, of course, I never was. But nevertheless, they know you and they trust you because they can place you. And in a way, it's what we all want. I mean, one of the hard things about living in cities is that we are so faceless. And community, having a group of people around you who know you, I mean, the joy of having a restaurant or a cafe where you can go in without any money and you say, well, pay me tomorrow. That sort of mesh of life is terribly important to us, I think. We need to be known who we are by people around us. And that's, I think, what we lack in cities and why there's so much loneliness. So I'm terribly lucky. That's the good side of the coin. That's the side I polish, and I forget about the bad side of the coin.
And Jeremy, when you starred opposite Meryl Streep, what was it like? Because she was a huge star, and you were the young actor. Was she helpful to you? What did you learn?
Oh, she was so helpful. She gave me a complete sense of proportion. Because when you first have a starring role in a movie, certainly in the old days, slightly less so now because there's slightly less money sloshing about. But in the old days, you would be picked up in a car that's as long as this room's wide. You'd be put up in a lovely hotel. You'd have people sort of getting you coffee and making you sandwiches, and you feel like a king. And you can go way wrong at that point because you can start thinking you are a king. Yeah. And what Meryl very clearly told me, not that I was being a pain in the arse, I don't think, but I think she just by the way she was, is that they take enormous care of you because you're terribly valuable to them, because you have to be there for them to shoot. But you're not any more important as a person. It's just that as a commodity, you're terribly valuable, and so they take enormous care of you. And that was a really important lesson because it as I say, gave you a sense of proportion about your own importance. And also what she told me was that the only thing that matters is the work. That's the only thing, which is tied up with the first thing, really. To make the work the best you can at the moment you're doing it, and to keep going and going and going to get it as best. And to aim everything in your life and your mind and everything towards that end. And I think it's the only bit of advice I gave my kids, actually. I'm not one for advice, really. And I said, it doesn't matter what you do. The only important thing is that you do it as best as you can, because that'll give you the pleasure and that'll give you the respect of others.
Well, of course, one of your sons, Max, is a very successful actor.
Yeah, he's getting on, yeah. Well, it's a tough life now. I mean, it's all cable TV series and there isn't... You can't go off into the provinces like I did and fail and learn, because you only learn when you fail. So it's tough for him, but he seems to be enjoying it.
Jeremy, there was a film, The Mission, that you starred opposite Robert De Niro. And there was a wonderful story you told about when you heard you were going to be working with him and how excited you were. But he wasn't feeling the same about you.
Well, no, wait. I mean, I was doing a play on Broadway, Tom Stoppard's The Real Thing. And I got a call from Roland Joffe, the film director, and he said, would you come down, I'm doing this film, would you come down and work with Robert De Niro in the village of New York? And I said, well, I'm doing a matinee. He said, oh. He said, well, could you come down between the matinee and the evening show? So I said, well, all right. So I go down there, and it's this sort of largish room, rehearsal room, I suppose it is, and Robert's sitting, or Bob, is sitting on a chair in the middle of the room. The room's completely empty. He's just sitting on this chair, and Roland's in the corner, and he says, Jeremy, now listen, this is a scene about a man, Bob is, who's done terrible things in his life, terrible things. He's a slave trader, and he's killed people, and terrible. And he's having difficulty with the way he feels about everything. And you are a priest, and you have to open him up and get him to begin to face what he's done. And with that, he said, go ahead. So I pulled up a chair next to Bob, because I thought this may be a long, well, I didn't realize how long it was going to be. I think I must have talked at him for about 40 minutes, and he just sat there. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And I tried everything, nothing. And after 40 minutes, I said, Roland, I've got to go for my evening show. I'm sorry. So he said, okay, fine. So I said goodbye, and I went back to the theatre to do my evening show. And I thought, well, that didn't go very well. I later discovered that Bob wanted a person, not an actor, a real-life person to play it. Okay. Roland had made a film called The Killing Fields with Dith Pran and Sam Waterston, and Dith was a real person, and Sam was an actor, and Bob wanted that same relationship. And they'd looked at many people. They'd looked at Christopher Lowe, the poet, English poet. They'd looked at the man who was a friend of Bob's, who directed On the Waterfront. What's his name?
Elia Kazan.
Elia Kazan. Yeah. Elia had actually flown to Los Angeles and apparently done a wonderful... No, Christopher Lowe flew to Los Angeles and wept a lot in his test. It was very impressive. Elia said, bugger off, I'm a film director, I'm not an actor. So don't ask me to do it. And so I thought, well, they're obviously looking, It was written for my father-in-law, Cyril Cusack, 10 years before, but of course now he was too old. And anyway, I finished the play. I heard nothing from them. Finished the play in New York, came back to London, and I thought, what am I going to do next? I don't know. And I called David Putnam, who was the producer. I said, David, have you cast that part yet of the priest? He said, no, we haven't. He said, the trouble is Bob wants a real person. He wants an older person, and, doesn't want an English actor who's younger than him. And I said, well, he said, why, do you want to do it? I said, well, I think I'd quite like to do it. He said, well, call Roland. I said, where is he? He says, he's in Cartagena in Colombia. He's looking for locations. So I called him that minute, as soon as I put it down on David, and I got Roland. And I said, Roland, I gather you haven't cast that part yet. He said, no, why? I said, well, I'd quite like to do it. He said, well, get on the next plane. So I got on the next plane and I flew out and I played it. Yeah. But Bob hated that fact, absolutely hated it. Didn't talk to me for the first, I think, month of shooting. Didn't even say good morning, nothing. And, I was relatively inexperienced. Yeah. And Bob is, pretty in New York. And it was difficult. It was difficult. And I actually began to get crosser and crosser about it until finally, in the middle of a jungle, in a makeup bus, which was empty of makeup girls, just us. I think we were hanging about for some shot. And we had the most God almighty row. We just yelled at each other. Everything that we felt. And it was enormous, actually. I think Roland had seen it coming, because I think that's why everything was cleared. Anyway, we had a huge row. But we got through it.
Yeah.
And Roland called Tookie Smith, Will Smith's sister, Tookie Smith. Will Smith, who was a fashion man, I think. She was Bob's girlfriend, and we were all living in a wonderful hotel on the edge of the Caribbean. And Roland called Tookie and said, they've had a huge row, they've got together, put on the pasta. And that night, Sinead and me and Tookie and Bob had a fantastic pasta dinner, and I think he'd sprinkled a little marijuana in it with it too. Ever since then, we've been huge friends.
Jeremy, you don't think it was his method acting? It was all on purpose.
I think a bit of it was method acting with Bob. Yeah.
Well, you came up against him again when you were nominated for your Oscar, and this was for your role in Reversal of Fortune, where you were playing, of course, Klaus von Bülow, a real-life character. Glenn Close had persuaded you to do it because you didn't want to. You thought it could be disrespectful to the family, I believe, at the time. But Glenn Close, who you were starring in a real thing on Broadway, persuaded you. And you did the film, and then you were nominated for the Oscar. You were up against Robert De Niro.
Was I?
Yes. Yeah. You were up against Robert De Niro for Awakenings, Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves, Richard Harris for The Field, and Gérard Depardieu for Cyrano de Bergerac.
Ooh.
And of course you won.
Isn't it funny? You know, I mean, awards, they're so strange. How can you judge? I mean, Gérard's performance was fantastic in Cyrano. Costner, the same, in Dances with Wolves, fantastic. I can't remember the other two. Richard Harris in The Field, lovely, lovely film.
De Niro
you can't compare.
Yeah.
But your time comes. Very interesting. I'm working with someone now whose time has come. Yeah. Leslie Manville. We all know that she's a good actress, but now, you know, she's nominated for a Olivier, she was nominated for an Oscar, she was nominated for a BAFTA. Her time has come because enough of the business knows that she's good and we need to say she's good, you know. Yeah. So you go through those. I mean, Meryl's time has remained always there, but for most of us, you know, we have our time and then we glide gently into more backwater.
That moment when they called your name, how did you feel?
Well, it all gets very sort of... I kissed everybody in sight. I kissed Madonna, who was sitting in front of me, who I don't know. And I kissed my agent and my publicist who were sitting beside me, so I'd gone through all of them. My wife was in London doing a play, so she wasn't there. Then I kissed Madonna. Michael Jackson was sitting next to Madonna, and I very nearly kissed Michael Jackson. But something held me back, which is unlike me. And I then made my way up and tried to remember who I had to thank. And it's sort of like a most wonderful birthday. Well, not that I like birthdays, actually, but it's a great time and a lot of good parties. And I remember being conscious that I was sitting at some party and someone was waiting to be introduced, but I was talking to someone else. And eventually when I turned around to see who was waiting to be introduced, it was Warren Beatty. And I thought, So it's quite a heady time. Yeah. Following day, we had a meeting with Columbia, with Mike Nichols and Meryl and me, to make a film called Remains of the Day. And we got frightfully excited. And Harold Pinter also was there. He'd written the script. And we got back on the plane to fly home. And I remember who was I flying with? Anyway, they said, I don't know how we're going to... Oh, it was Harold, that's right. He said, next to me, he said, I don't know how we can afford this film. Mike Nichols takes a huge cut. And there's me and I mean, I don't know how they can make it. Well, they didn't. Or not with us. Tony Hopkins and Emma Thompson did it. Yeah. A lovely film it was. But they were heady days. And then I got home, and it's funny what you remember more than the moment where you hear your name called. I got home and there were sacks of mail from peers who I all thought hated me, or were jealous of me, or didn't rate me, but from peers in the business, from local councillors, I mean, it was an extraordinary outpouring of congratulations, which I really valued. And it was great. And everybody then sends you their script that they can't get made because they think you're an Oscar winner, you'll get their film made. And so you have to read through these terrible scripts which will never deserve to get made, which is why they haven't been made. And it all passes and you continue on as you sort of have done.
Well, you've won so many awards, Jeremy, but I couldn't believe it when I was reading about you. You haven't won a BAFTA. Is that right?
No, I don't win awards in this country. They don't rate me.
I mean, I think we better start.
I did win the Clarence Darwin Award for the best newcomer. Oh. But that was a long time ago.
Now you talked
about... Any
oh.
BAFTA voters here tonight, just make notes, will you?
I'm sure it'll come, won't it, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, we'll start campaigning. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about your wife, Sinead, because you've talked about her a lot, and I think it's going to be about 40 years?
It is.
It is.
Actually. Don't tell her.
Okay.
I don't think she remembers.
Oh.
I remember driving down one night. She was playing at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I was filming up north with Brideshead, and I drove down because it was our wedding anniversary. I drove down. She'd done the play. We went to the Dirty Duck in Stratford. She had a lot of actor friends around her who were in the cast, and there was me. And at one point during dinner, I felt in my pocket, and I gave her this rather nice little box, which had a little jewel inside. And I gave it to her, and I said, "Happy anniversary." And she turned, she's in the middle of talking, and she turned to me and said, what anniversary? So we've never been really ones for anniversaries. But somebody told me about 2 weeks ago, said it's your 40th wedding anniversary on March the 28th, isn't it? I said, is it? And I said, right, great. She'll forget, she won't know. But I went out and I bought, it's the red jewel, what's it called?
The ruby.
So I said, ruby ready. Yeah. So I'm going to get a tiny ruby because anything big she'll lose. And I'm going to give it to her on Wednesday. And I think it's going to be a huge mark for me.
Oh, we
but
hope
so don't mention it. Don't mention it.
We won't. Don't say anything, lady. If you happen to see her, don't tell her.
No.
But obviously, it's been a fantastic marriage.
It's been horrendous. I mean, day by day, we struggle on.
I was going to say, in the world of showbiz, it's sustained fantastically.
Yeah.
What's been the secret?
Well, she thinks it's because I never throw anything out.
Oh, okay.
She's always allowed herself a sense of security because of that, because I don't. I mean, I keep all my old clothes and I never throw things away. But no, in truth, all mocking aside, I'm extremely lucky. I mean, she comes from an Irish dynasty of actors. I knew I needed to marry an Irish woman. Yeah. And I didn't know I needed to marry an actor, but I knew. So when she came along, I thought, this is difficult, though. Difficult. I mean, anybody worthwhile is difficult, aren't they, really? And as she's told me many times, if I had a little sponge, I'd be bored within, a year. She is difficult and complicated and absolutely glorious. And I once said that she's like having a Lamborghini. Huge fun to drive, but you're often trying to maintain it.
Jeremy, there's so much to talk to you about, but I do want to open it up to the audience. But I just wanted to quickly ask you before I do. I mean, you've done so much. You've been the voice of Scar in The Lion King. You have little kids that are frightened of you sometimes when you meet them. If you put the voice on, you're in.
It's wonderful because, kids, sometimes you want to get them away.
You're Ben Affleck's butler in the Justice League to his Batman. I mean, so many different kind of roles, such an eclectic mix. But what is there a role left that you haven't played that you'd like to? I know you directed Carly Simon in a music video. You directed a film about a boy who was a refugee from Bosnia.
Mirad, that's right.
For Channel 4. But would you actually like to take the helm of a feature film as a director?
Not really. It's a terrible job. It's really hard, especially now. And there are a lot of good directors about. And, I get lazier. And I'm able to do 3 films a year if I want to. And the ones that don't work, I can forget I did. But if I'm to direct something, it'll take me 3 years to get it up and running and done, at least. And if it doesn't work, it hangs around your neck like a dead swan for the rest of your life. And you don't get paid for it, of course, because you're an actor. So they don't think they won't pay you very much. So it would have to be something that I really wanted to do. And there isn't anything, actually. I would rather give something I really wanted to do to a good director.
Right, okay. And what about your charities? Because we talked about them a little bit at the beginning, and there's Children in the Arts, there's the prison Phoenix Trust as well.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important for everyone in your position or positions of success in order to give back and make a difference?
I think it helps. We have profile, and often what we can give a charity is profile. And it's very easy to do. And I'm incredibly lucky. I get paid very well for doing what I love. And very few people can say that. So it is nice to be able to feel that you're, it sounds a bit sort of pleasing oneself, putting something back, but it just gives me a little bit of pleasure to feel I can help in some ways. And the Prison Phoenix Trust, if you don't know about it, Google it, look it up. It's the most wonderful charity. Have 9 people in the office, and all the money goes directly. All the people who do meditation and yoga in prisons are all volunteers. They come in and they do it with the prison staff and with the prisoners who want to. And it is the most incredible way to help prisoners find themselves, calm themselves, give themselves something to take out when they eventually, hopefully, leave prison. They've got that habit, they've got that sense of themselves. It's the most extraordinarily good, and of course our prison service, which is wildly underfunded and actually disgraceful. This is a little ray of sunshine. So if you get as depressed as I do about our prison situation in this country, look up the Prison Phoenix Trust, and if you can support them, if you do yoga and meditation and you want to go, maybe give an afternoon a week in a prison, just think about it. Just throw that out there.
Okay, good. Now we have time for questions. Who wants to go first? Oh, we've got lots of questions.
Do you know those wonderful? You should get one. The balls with a microphone in, so that you can just, they're big, like footballs, soft, with a mic in, and you can just throw them. Really good for these.
Or beyond.
Do you immerse yourself in the history when you're making a film that's got a historical context?
Yeah, what you do is to learn everything you can that you don't know about this time of life, the period, the person, if it's an actual person, which that was, so that your perception is of a person of that date. And that was a very interesting one. It was a pre-Holocaust film. And I said, we mustn't kowtow to what we know now happened after that. We can't pussyfoot around. Things were different before then. Racial feeling was different, and we must be accurate to how it was then, I believe. And so I would read a lot around about what was written up to, in the 30 years up to that period, because I thought, well, that's what that would be his perception of life. And whatever the story is, I mean, the mission, for instance, I knew nothing about Jesuits, I knew nothing, I wasn't Catholic, I wasn't a priest, I wasn't a Jesuit, didn't know anything about South America, so I did a lot of reading around that, so that because you have to feel you are it when you play a character. You have to feel you are him.
Did you actually form an opinion as to whether, in retrospect, a boycott of those Olympics could have changed the course of history?
It can only be surmise, but I suspect not. It's very interesting. Without, do we send footballers to Russia now?
Yeah.
I think we have to keep contact as much as we can. We don't have to like what's happening in the Kremlin or the way Mr. Putin and his little coterie think and behave. We don't have to like that, but I think we have to keep communicating as countries, and through sport is a great way to do it. Diplomacy is also important, which is why I'm slightly worried that we're all pulling everybody out, because we've got to talk to each other. We don't want to have to communicate through the barrel of a gun. And so I would, my attitude actually is the same as, I can't remember what his name was, the character I played. But anyway, he argued that the Americans should go and take part in the Berlin Olympics, despite what was beginning to happen.
The young lady here.
Hi, shall I wait for the mic?
Yes, we'll just...
Do you agree or do you not agree? Because a lot of people didn't agree.
No, I don't agree. I think
You think we should not have gone?
Churchill always said the Second World War was an unnecessary war, and he would point to various things. If only they'd have been done slightly differently, it could have avoided 60 million deaths. So I'm not sure I do agree with you, but obviously I respect what you
Yeah. Whether that one thing would have made a difference, I don't know. I mean,
one amongst many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of other factors too.
We're doing too many things at the moment, I think, with Russia. I think we've got to be a little bit kinder to them, actually. I think do you feel a sort of build-up, of anti-Russia? And I can't see it's any good can come of it.
We've got time for one last question, because you were asking from the beginning.
I just wanted to ask about what might have been another difficult role, that of Humbert in Lolita. And a second part of the question, if you could imagine that film being made now.
No, I can't imagine Lolita being made now. It was very difficult to make it when we made it, because there have been some terrible cases in Belgium and in America. And Humbert was perceived to be a pedophile, although a person who works in that field who I talked to in America said, no, actually he's not a pedophile because he knows he's doing wrong. Pedophiles don't, apparently. Anyway, I don't know about that. It was really difficult to make. I mean, to tell you how difficult it was to make, every time we had a scene where Lolita would sit on Humbert's lap, we had to video one of the, what dentists put on when they're doing X-ray, those lead things. Well, we had to video on a separate camera this lead mat put on my lap before she sat on me, in case we would take it to court, to say, this was absolutely above board. So everyone was very nervous making the film. It was slightly uncomfortable. I used that discomfort because Humbert was uncomfortable. He knew he was doing wrong, and so I sort of wove that into the character. I got criticised quite a bit for making him too nice, because apparently people who do bad things are always nasty. I wasn't aware of that, and I'm not sure it's true. And I wanted... But then we came to put it out in America, and they didn't dare. The studio didn't dare put it out. They didn't know how to sell it. It's quite a hard one to sell. And I said, sell it like a tragedy, which it is. It's what happens if you overstep the bounds. It all goes very, very badly wrong eventually. And that's the classic, you've seen Shakespeare and the Greeks, that's the classic way a tragedy pans out. And I said, if you sell it like that, you might get a theatrical release, but we didn't. I think we got a tiny one. But I think it's quite a good film. It turns my stomach when I see it now. I saw it about 2 years ago, and I thought, oh, God.
Jeremy, I almost got through all my cards, not quite all of them, but there was...
Well, I think it's sad that we can't make it now. I'm really worried about the fact that we've got terribly nervous about what we dare talk about.
Yeah, well, that's what we were saying before.
And I think that's awful. Yes. I think the arts should challenge us all the time. Storytelling should challenge us and make us think and make us maybe shift our perspectives. And that's why we paint, why we write, why we act. And I don't think we must get too precious.
Mustn't lose that. Before Martha's going to come and thank us on stage, Jeremy, just tell us quickly what you'll be doing with your favourite poet, T.S. Eliot.
Oh, yes. I don't know if it's sold out, but in Southwark Cathedral, I think April the 9th, is it?
Yes, Michelle says, yeah, April the 9th.
Where I'm reading the Four Quartets, which is one of my favourite bits of Eliot. And if you have never heard the Four Quartets and you've never been to Southwark Cathedral, then come along.
Jeremy Irons, thank you so much for your time.